Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe.
Oh, it's interesting because I think Sunny's very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
You know, I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, are just very dull-minded. Mm-hmm. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart, but captured.
Wright, the presenter, entered the room expecting a calm conversation, but Greg Gutfeld and Joe Rogan escalated it into a full-fledged ego fight straight out of WrestleMania. One moment she was preaching, and the next she was hit with direct facts, acerbic barbs, and sharp logic bullets. Rogan's direct facts struck a deep chord, while Gutfeld's humor was sharp enough to break through the View script.
People think things are funny because they don't think about the person they're making fun of. You and I are both guilty of doing that.
Of course.
As comics.
Absolutely.
But that one was like particularly
You're like, wow.
rough.
Well, it was started at View and then have all these ones.
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say in The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist. She injected skin color into a fairly generic behavior.
Sunny Host seemed to think she was still on The View rather than going straight inside the Thunderdome. The worst thing she could have done, between sipping lattes and distributing moral superiority like party favors, was to make fun of Joe Rogan. Big mistake. Massive. It would be like showing up at a jiu-jitsu class with a shirt that reads, "Please toss me with a latte in one hand and your own oat in the other." She probably thought she was delivering a righteous smackdown to an audience used to applauding everything with a stage and a microphone.
Worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is and Joe Rogan believes in dragons.
Then, however, Greg Gutfeld barged in like a WWE fighter, wearing an imaginary belt named Smugness Slayer and carrying a folding chair made of sarcasm, as if fate's sense of humor was inferior to Gutfeld's jokes. It was more than just a return. A live tag team was destroyed.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
When Sunny unleashed her trademark sanctimony, it was met with instant retaliation. A degrading present with a stamped return to sender. It started with one of her well-known rant, the kind that has a thin academic fade and is rife with self-righteousness.
More time to talk. And I thought Will Smith wouldn't let a black man finish. If her IQ was half as high as her smugness, she'd be Einstein.
She had Rogan firmly in her focus, imagining herself making a principled stand, maybe even defending democracy or pushing back against men in flannel shirts, simply by challenging free speech on Spotify, and her comments carried a subtle tone of moral certainty meant to resonate with a brunch-ready audience and confident fashion choices. But the moment didn't unfold the way she expected, because instead of approval or polite agreement, she ran into a sharp two-part response, with Rogan offering steady, big-picture reasoning, while Gutfeld charged the exchange with fast, cutting humor, and rather than just answering her points, they broke them down carefully, like two people realizing too late that what they were fixing was never solid to begin with, all while Joe remained completely at ease, showing no tension as he leaned back in his chair and relied on his usual method of introducing clear logic at exactly the right time, calmly exposing gaps and contradictions with the effortless focus of someone handling a simple task while explaining a complex idea.
And frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that sent women back, is The View. You want to talk about that show, if the CIA is engineering, Antifa and fucking the Capitol riot, some crazy misogynist engineered The View, because there's nothing worse than The View. In terms of there are so many brilliant women out there, none of them are on The View. none of them have gone near the set of The View. I mean, they have brought in the lowest tier of the, what is it, the Y chromosome?
No.
The X.
Greg Gutfeld didn't bother treating her argument as something that deserved careful consideration. He laughed through it as if he'd been handed a rejected greeting card script scribbled in crayon, flipping her speech into a merciless roast, so intense it felt like even the microphone wanted some distance. And with his trademark grin and cutting humor, he made it clear he wasn't angry, just amazed that she believed this approach would land, which only delighted the audience as they soaked up every moment and wanted more. Because before Sunny's team could step in with a quick clarification, clips of the exchange were already spreading online, and within hours, Gutfeld and Rogan's supporters packed social media with reactions like she set herself up for that, leaving many to wonder if she lost track of the moment while it was happening. But rewind for a second, because the uncomfortable lead-up matters, since Sunny didn't merely stumble into the discussion, but burst into it loudly, attempting to frame Rogan as dangerous, divisive, and detached. An accusation that rang hollow coming from a co-host of a show best known for shouting its way into public attention.
Did you watch the whole thing or just the parts that I sent you?
I watched it. Obviously, just the parts that Did I watch a whole episode of The View?
No woman can do that unless you're stupid. But
I have a job.
Here's the thing. How can they call themselves progressives when they keep saying that nothing has progressed? Then it's on them.
Rather than circling back to the same points, she took a jab at someone far more seasoned in public clashes than she was prepared for, and Rogan responded by breaking down her claims with precise, methodical clarity. No shouting, no showmanship, just steady focus, like watching an expert. Calmly disarm a problem piece by piece, and by the end of it, her argument was scattered into scraps of doubt and second thoughts. Because when she accused him of pushing false ideas, he countered with a rapid stream of facts that were blunt, persistent, and deeply uncomfortable. The kind that leave television hosts shifting uneasily and glancing at the teleprompter for rescue. Yet while Rogan treated the exchange like a strategy game, Gutfeld arrived with pure mischief, aiming to amuse rather than instruct, comparing her viewpoint to a private group chat that somehow escaped into public view, joking that her logic leaked more than a fishing net dropped into the wrong waters, and turning her into a symbol of mistaking clever talk for genuine understanding.
Critics say that you make everything about race.
Yeah.
And what's your response to people when they say that?
My response to people is that unfortunately, because of the origins of this country and the original sin of this country, everything is about race. And that's just true, right? But if we were a country that could come to grips with our history, accept our history, perhaps pay reparations that are due, and perhaps just stop trying to erase our history.
That outcome was exactly what you'd expect from someone who had already been checked into silence and turned into internet punchlines, and no one was asking her for a second attempt. Yet when it came, it was even more slippery, more polished, and somehow carried even less substance, like slapping tape on a ship that's already taking on water, while the funniest twist was watching her supporters rush in to defend her, spinning explanations with the frantic energy of kids scrambling for the last cookie, insisting Rogan was being aggressive and complaining that Gutfeld was too sharp. But that argument falls apart fast, because once you start the fight, you can't complain when the response is bigger than expected. And in the end, this wasn't just a harsh exchange, it was a full examination of a mindset. A moment that showed how the long-standing belief that traditional media controls the truth finally crashed.
Saw you on The View. They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested.
Meanwhile, Rogan's audience took off. Gutfeld's ratings shot up. At the next taping, however, Sunny probably claimed that nothing had happened. But it's still uncertain how long a show like The View can survive in a society that is laughing more at its own absurdity, thinking more clearly, and moving faster. The greatest irony is this. Sunny tried to make Rogan seem too strong, too unvarnished, and too dangerous. But in the process, she made it apparent how powerless her own voice has become. If Rogan poses a cultural threat, Sunny is the town crier, yelling at the clouds for allowing it to rain. Gutfeld is in charge of the circus she didn't realize she was in, if he is the clown.
Joy Behar calls her a 10. I mean, How dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
Well said.
Just when it felt like the spectacle had reached its peak, tougher questions began to surface. What if this became routine, and every time that familiar panel spoke, someone from outside their bubble responded with evidence, wit, and an even larger crowd listening? What if it became clear that the supposed authorities were wrapped in nothing more than recycled talking points? Because let's be honest, this wasn't a narrow defeat, it was a complete collapse, with Rogan showing how carefully arranged stories can unravel when exposed to open, unscripted ideas, even the uncomfortable ones, while Gutfeld demonstrated that humor cuts deepest when those in power have forgotten how to laugh at themselves, and Sunny unintentionally proved that claiming the moral high ground without self-awareness often translates to wondering why applause never arrives. And will any of this spark real change? Probably not, as they'll keep sipping tea, clutching pearls, and insisting democracy is under threat from a man with a podcast and another armed with jokes.
End of time. You're right. Anytime she says something stupid, I'm going to go, slave owner! Kat, I just watched that. That's the second time I've watched that. She was tipped off beforehand, right? Because they had to tell her before, so she had time to regroup. They wouldn't just surprise. You think? No?
I don't know. I feel like
Will Sunny answer back online with another subtle jab that quietly fades away? Or will there ever be a guest on The View who challenges the storyline instead of nodding along like a living sound clip? And could she ever sit across from Joe Rogan for a marathon conversation while the internet fuels itself with popcorn jokes and memes? Because Gutfeld might even send her a gift basket stamped nice. Try, since this clash wasn't a one-time flare-up, but a preview of what happens when the old guard runs into voices that aren't filtered or polished, when carefully scripted commentary falls apart next to raw honesty, and when humor, logic, and plain-spoken truth crack the walls of a fortress built on borrowed ideas and staged applause. And if the moment had background music...
You know what Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said that Biden could arrest all the Republicans and put them in jail. You just need to see how unhinged this kind of thinking is. Well, you know what Joe Biden could do? Joe Biden, you have to see it. Because it's so
On TV,
crazy.
she said
On
The real discussion is unfolding far beyond that studio, and it's louder, sharper, and far more entertaining, raising the question of whether the show can ever manage a thoughtful exchange without collapsing into a 5-person shouting contest broken up by skincare ads, or whether it can handle opposing ideas without acting as if there's something to quarantine. And then there's the unexpected duo of Rogan and Gutfeld, which makes you wonder if this was the birth of a thinker and jokester combo with serious staying power or simply a one-off spectacle. Because if they continue crossing paths, the comfort zone of the media crowd starts looking very fragile, since they didn't just fire back, but showed a clear formula, humor on one side, solid facts on the other, and zero patience for smug posturing. And if Sunny feels tempted to strike back, she'll need far more than frustration, because the next round could play out in front of everyone with no easy escape.